Hello everyone, I am Ethys and I have a luscious pink beard today, and we are heading into the Great Gubal Library hard mode for a cheeky little lore tour. How about that? This is one of those ones that I thought I'd done and I hadn't done. I guess I was confusing my memory with the story mode. Anyway, what are we doing here? So we have been tasked by one Yaya K, receptionist of the Thaumaturge's Guild, to retrieve a particular tome that actually turns out to be the library's index, which she intends to be basically a first step towards cataloging and eventually restoring the library, which is really exciting. Will we ever get to come here and spend time reading when it's restored? Probably not. Great. Bibliophobe. Now, I'm sure you guys all know what a phobia is. That one's obvious enough. But what would a bibliophobe be doing in the library? We know imps are sort of, mischievous and, I don't know, in here vandalizing? Spinebreaker is obviously a pun, and bibliolater comes from the Greek latria, to worship. Now this is obviously distinct from bibliophilia, being that worshipping and loving books are, I'm sure they overlap, but they are distinct. And it's often used in reference to fundamentalist monotheism for people, usually as a criticism as well, for people who take gospel literally and appear to worship and idolize a text and the contents of a book rather than a deity itself. Now, we just passed there another copy of The Boy and the Dragon Gay. It's a story that we've heard told a few times, both in the main scenario quest and various side quests throughout Heavensward. It's a pretty popular tale that is considered heresy by the church. It's a story about basically a dragon rescues a young boy who gets in trouble with some bandits. Now we have here Bibliovores. Now, the void is characterized by a lack of ether, right? And Voidsent by a hunger of ether. So it seems that the Bibliovores are here feeding on the ethereal constituents of the books, because as we know, particularly if we play an arcanist of some kind, that books actually contain a great deal of ether in themselves. So we have that, and we have the Bobolus, which is the Greek term for the boogeyman or the bogeyman, however you want to say it. Hides under naughty children's beds and punishes them. Now, there's not really much more to say about the etymology of the Bobolus, but we know from the Encyclopedia Eorzea that they were used by the Marquis for kidnappings, for assassinations, for sabotage, for those more stealthy things. And pretty much that they're the reason that the Amdapori first developed Dispel, to be able to obviously dispel their stealth magics. Now we have the Demon of the Tome, and I'm sure you guys all, have been looking at the text of the book that it comes out of there. It's actually the same as the Demon book from the story mode, and it's the same as every open book that we see in the library, which I've commented on before, which I find a little bit disappointing. That's just the same texture, but I'll put the text for that up on screen here. It's not in a readable, anything like English or any Latin language or any sort of real world language. It seems to be some sort of ancient language, but the titles we get are let's see if I can remember this. Pentetalothus? I think it's Pentetalothus Ethiologicad Ilkeors. So I remember talking about this. The penta seems to imply, the number 5. Ilkeors, I mean, that sounds like another term for Eorzea, right? And Ethologicad, obviously, it's got something to do with ether, with etherology. So I feel like it's a book of magic. Like, no shit, it's a book of magic. But that's all we can really get out of it. I don't think Koji has at any point told us what the contents of that book actually is. So anyway, the demon book is the Demon of the Tome, the demon book. The Demon of the Tome is probably not a Voidsent. Now, we know that demon walls are allegedly soulkin that are fueled by arcane inscriptions of blood that you sort of write on a wall. And the Tome demon has exactly the same appearance, so it seems that the contents of this book are written in blood. I think it's safe to assume they're written in blood, and have either deliberately or accidentally resulted in the summoning of this soulkin. Now here we have ink stains, which again, as I've said, the contents of the books in here do contain a lot of ether, and a large part of that is the ink that's used in writing them. So we've got an ink spill here, which has provided a vessel for a lesser Voidsent, and that's what the ink stain is. Excuse me. Now a bibliophagist, we're just killing here, is someone who loves to read books. The suffix phagist, however, means to eat. So we have further confirmation here that the Voidsent are accumulating in the library, basically in order to feed on the ether that is contained within these books. Enchanted inkhorns, I'm assuming that they're basically just enchanted for convenience by the Sharlayans. We also had a fire homunculus there, which we've already killed. I don't think we're coming up on. I think those are the only fire homunculi we have in this whole dungeon, which is a bit of a shame. But the term homunculus, again, homunculus is one of those like medieval sort of philosophy term. I mean, using the term philosophy very, very loosely. It's basically like a small created person. It's either the little person that sits in your head and acts as your conscience or whatever, or it's like a small little person that you've constructed. Anyway, the implication is it's artificial, that soulkin has been constructed by the Sharlayans as, chandeliers, candelabras, whatever you will. We also had a biblioclasm back there. That was the ogre, and they are Voidsent. Biblioclasm is the destruction of books. It basically means book burning. Given that the ogre is a Voidsent, seems difficult to discern its motivation. Maybe it's trying to burn the books that have like Voidsent trapped in them, and therefore release those Voidsent. Anyway, we had the Forbidden Tomes back there. I'm having to play catch up myself here. I know we're already on Liquid Flame, but I'm having to play catch up. So apparently the lazy Sharlayan bibliomancers experimented with enchantments that would make the books basically archive and shelve themselves. Didn't go quite right, and we have the Forbidden Tome as a result of that. Now, we're in the Astrology and Astromancy camera, this place is called. It's clearly a kind of star chart, but its size and position and the fact that it's also described as a camera, it leads me to believe that it's also designed to have light and or ether from the constellations basically reflected onto it for it to display heavenly movements in real time. The first thing I thought of when I saw this was actually, being a massive Elder Scrolls nerd, the Dwemer focus crystal puzzles in Skyrim, and I think there's something pretty similar going on here. I'll throw a screenshot in here for that. So super interesting. The symbol radiating from the center star, it's once again a logarithmic spiral, the same iconography we see pretty much everywhere in Sharlayan design and architecture. Now, I've talked about this before, most notably in the Gubal library story mode, and basically what I think it means. It was a very important symbol to Renaissance mathematics and metaphysics, because it's something that can be described very simply and accurately in mathematics, which also appears everywhere in nature, and it's used as a sort of case in point, whether or not this is actually true, that everything in the universe can be made knowable to human understanding with formal logic and mathematics. And that is, of course, what the Sharlayans are all about as a culture. They're very heavily based on this kind of Renaissance Neoplatonism, but Encyclopedia Aurea gives a far simpler, in my opinion, less interesting explanation, which I can actually just quote directly for you. Where are we? Here we are. When Thaliarch poured the waters of knowledge into his river, the spiral shell became their keeper, such as the legend wherein the Nautilus came to symbolize wisdom. Whew. Now, of course, we have the liquid flame back there as well, which is probably a soulkin, distinct from Alexander's living liquid, which has a mechanical core. I think it's pretty safe to assume that this one has a crystal core, which makes the difference between a soulkin and a forgekin, of course. It's a bit hard to speculate its function, but I think it might be designed to destroy sensitive contents of the library in the extreme case that has been breached by some unauthorized party like us that cannot be repelled. I can't really think of any other reason Sharlayans would possibly have for a living flame inside a library, unless, of course, it isn't Sharlayan at all, but I think it probably is. Now, of course, we're upstairs here in the new section of the library, and what I think is pretty much the only interesting part of this dungeon, to be perfectly honest with you. It's guarded by Progos, which we're slaughtering here, which Encyclopedia tells us are common toads that have been enchanted to act as servants and familiars. Now, Polished is the suffix for someone that sells or trades certain kinds of goods, so those Progos would be more properly Bibliopolists, unless of course they're Progos that are selling other Progos. And a Bibliopegist, which is the other Progo there, is a bookbinder. So really just solidifying here in different terms that the Progos operate as upkeepers and librarians. Now, as for the Mammoths here, we have mechanoscribes. A mechanoscribe is traditionally someone who writes copy before the invention of the printing press. So I think what we're seeing here is a Charlene solution to the problem, that they're using Mammoths to perform the same function as a printing press, which is pretty neat. A servitor is a male servant. It's often used traditionally as a way to describe undergrads who provide assistance or perform tasks for a postgrad in a university in exchange for tuition or such. So whoever designed the mechanoservitor was evidently trying to fulfill the professorial dream of making students completely redundant on campus. It's also very interesting that the mechanoservitor takes the appearance of a Viking, which is what the modern marauder evolved from the ancient homeland of the sea wolves called Airsland, which is in the far north in the same region as Charlene. So Charlene have obviously had some kind of historical contact with them. And then, of course, we had the Mechanomagus. It's fairly self-explanatory, magus being a synonym for a mage or wizard, presumably how the Charlenes refer to their local equivalent of black mage or thaumaturge. The encyclopedia tells us that they were designed basically so that the Charlenes wouldn't have to filthy their own hands in the defense of their city and assets. Now, a panda is a mammal of the Ursidae or bear family. I make jokes about this all the time, but I'm sure the name confuses a bunch of people too. A panda is another one of those enemies from Final Fantasy V, which has been named in more recent versions Apprehender. Now, apprehend is, of course, a near synonym of comprehend, but for something more, I guess, more perceptual than conceptual. But it can also mean to capture or arrest someone, which is clearly its function here. The alternatives are that Apadana is an old Persian word for a grand hyperstyle chamber, something which seems quite common in Charlene architecture, or the Sanskrit word apada, which is a noun for a hiding place or concealment, and he's of course here hiding in a book. Put all these together, you get a very nice picture of a panda. Also, given he's the same model and function as Biblos, who's described as a Voidsent in the encyclopedia, he's in fact a Voidsent, which the Charlenes have bound. Naughty Charlenes think they're too clever to fall for the same mistakes as the Marquis. They think they're too clever to fall for the same mistakes as anyone. They use all these magics that have been forbidden after these disasters that have caused in ancient eras, and they think they're too smart for all that, and it's going to catch up to them one day. Mark my word. Now, Strix is, of course, the Greek word for owl. There's also a kind of demonic bird in ancient Greek and Roman legend, a form taken by those cursed for the act of cannibalism, and they generally drink the blood of infants. It also became the origins of the Romanian word for vampire, strigoi, and so you see the name Strix used quite often in association with vampires in popular culture. Now, of course, the owl is a stereotypical symbol of wisdom. It's likely that for that reason, I should say. Excuse me, I'm getting flustered having to go a mile a minute through this whole bloody dungeon. It's for that reason now the Charlenes have enchanted an owl to represent wisdom. The same way they have the Progos. That's the most likely explanation. But my pet theory is that Strix is something a little more like the librarian from Terry Pratchett's Discworld novels. That he was once a humanoid Charlene librarian that through some experiment with forbidden magics transformed him or herself and just never bothered reversing it or wasn't able to reverse it. Or of course he could have just eaten some babies and been cursed. Who knows? He's also sitting in a chair that I desperately need. It's going to be a mount fairly soon. I really hope it comes complete with flying books. Ira did some art for me sitting on it, and I just really need this in my life. And of course we've got a behemoth ward. I don't know how you seal a behemoth in a book, but I guess if you can do it with Voidsent, you can do it with the behemoth. Why the hell not? Strix is dead. Holy crap. I'm sure I missed a bunch of stuff there. Actually, I know for a fact that I did miss some of the text dialogue. So just briefly, we got a love letter to Brayflox from a Rogaden, from a particular unnamed Rogaden. We've got Over the Horizon Redux talking about the mammal jar a little bit more. We've got on the culinary applications of goblins, talking about how someone got basically poisoned for trying to eat a goblin. And literary analysis on the Boy and the Dragon game, implying that it's from an older myth where the boy actually ends up being transformed into a dragon via partaking of the dragon's blood, given that he's injured and on the brink of death. Anyway, wow. There's Gubal hard mode. There's a return to our lore tours. Now, we've got the Japanese Fan Fest in a couple of days, and I'm going to be putting out some content summarizing and analyzing all the important stuff from that. So subscribe to that if you haven't already, and look forward to that. And yeah, thanks everyone for listening. I'll link the rest of the text for these for the texts that are in here. In case any of you missed it, because you probably don't get many opportunities to read that stuff while you're running through. So I'll link that in the description below. Check that out. Like and subscribe for more. I'm Ethys, and as always, thanks for watching.